G'day mortals, my name is Mika, and today I'm going to be introducing you to Sprout the Fairy. This whole topic of this video is so exciting to me. I absolutely love everything about Sprout the Fairy, and working at the Ohio Renaissance Festival. It's so amazing. I can't wait to get into it. So, 2020, I auditioned to be an official cast member of the Ohio Renaissance Festival. And if you are looking into auditioning for the Ohio Renaissance Festival or any other festival, I highly recommend it, even if you don't have any acting experience, because, at least in my experience with the Ohio Renaissance Festival, they pretty much hired everybody who could physically do the job. Like, if there was no competition, it was like, if you can do it, if you can physically be a cast member of the Ohio Renaissance Festival, you were hired. And that could have been just because they didn't have a tremendous amount of people auditioning, because it was 2020. But yeah, like, there was no competition at all, which is amazing. So I made the Ohio Renaissance Festival cast, and after I think 2 weekends, we had to audition again if we wanted to be a special character or do a special show. So you had to audition separately for the Fae Guild, the Pirate Guild, I think like the Witch Guild, and then you also had to audition for specific shows. So if you wanted to sing, you could audition for the singing shows. If you wanted to dance, you audition for the dance shows. Same thing with musical instruments. So I auditioned to be a fairy and a dancer. And obviously, I made dance. I mean, if you know anything about me personally, I danced my entire life, and I went to university for a bachelor in fine arts and dance, so obviously I was gonna make the dance. But I was a bit nervous about the Fae, because in order to be a Fae for the Ohio Renaissance Festival, you have to be super, like, extra and just out of this world and very extroverted and great with kids. But I think the biggest thing that they were looking for the Fae casting was actually the costuming, because for the Fae, they don't have any costuming that you can borrow or rent or whatever. So the Fae had to provide their own garb, and so I already had my garb, and so I really think that was a big reason why I made the Fae, because they were only taking like 4 new people, and there were 8 new people auditioning, and so I was one of those who made it, probably because of my garb. But another thing they were looking for was the way you moved. Obviously, I can move. I'm not even going to be humble about it. I know I can dance, I know I can move. I have 20 years of dance experience, and several of those years were professional dance experience, so obviously I knew that I could move. But they were also looking for how well you could play with children. They actually had a little girl at the audition who we played tag with, and they looked at how we interacted with her. And then they also looked at how, basically, I don't want to say secure about yourself, but how far you could go with everyone watching you. Like, for example, one of the things we did was we were in a circle, and we basically played a game like word ball, but it was with singing. So we'd go in the center, we'd start singing a song, and then someone else would take their place, and they'd start singing a different song, and then so on and so forth. So they weren't looking for how good you could sing, because the Fae don't sing, or at least they're not required to sing. They can sing, but it's not like the pirates where they're like, they have to sing. The Fae did not have to sing. But what they were looking for was basically if we could sing in front of other people, and like how big and extra we could be. And I was a little bit worried, because I am an introvert, but I'm not really an introvert by choice. I do want to be more extroverted. And as I practice, the more years of RenFest experience and just experience with my 1-year-old daughter, I'm sure over the years, I'm gonna learn how to be really just big and exciting and extra, and you know, being able to entertain children, because that is our main job as a Fae, is to entertain little children. So I'm in the Fae, and what's awesome about being an Ohio Renaissance Festival cast member is that we got to choose our own characters, And as a Fae member, I almost had complete free range. I did have to abide by certain restrictions, like for example, my Ravenswood leather bodice I wasn't allowed to wear because it was a bit too modern. The Ohio Renaissance Festival is supposed to take place in, I think it's 1759, and my Ravenswood leather bodice has these snaps, and it just looked a little too modern, so that was not approved, but I have this one, which is approved, which I actually prefer this bodice for this character anyway, so I probably would have made the switch anyway. And then, like, we have to wear a hat, we have to wear sleeves, which sucks because it can get really hot at the beginning of the season in Ohio. And yeah, our costumes as Fae member had to be really, like, extra. I don't know what other word to use. Very extravagant. Not necessarily rich, like, you know, a nobleman or noblewoman like in the court, but just very attention grabbing, you know. And I know that this costume is, and they actually really loved this garb because it's so textile. There's so many different textures and there's so many things to fiddle with. Every single character at as a cast member at the Ohio Renaissance Festival, every cast member has to have a job of some sort. But for the fairies, it can be more like a power in a sense. Like, my job as a fairy is, I'm a seed and pollination fairy. I am the fairy of seeds and pollination. So at first I actually wanted to be more of an animal caretaker fairy, and I wanted to have like little chestnut over here on my shoulder, and it was gonna be so cute. But we aren't allowed to have shoulder pets because, you know, they don't move, they're not, you know, interactive, and so it would break the magic for little children, and I actually agree. It kind of sucks that I can't wear my my squirrel, but I totally get why, because it would honestly break the magic for most of the kids. But after doing a lot of thinking and looking at my entire garb, I decided to go with the seed and pollination fairy because I just look very earth and planty, and then my wings are like bee wings, and I still can be like interactive with animals, not like I'm actually interacting with animals, but my job can be interacting with animals because I'm like a manager of the pollinators. So with, you know, the bugs, the bees, the butterflies, and then the critters like squirrels and rabbits, I basically, Sprout the fairy, basically make sure that they are actually doing their jobs as pollinators and getting the seeds all over the place. And I also can help plant seeds as well. So once I had established my official job as a fairy, I needed a name. So I wanted a name that was going to be very recognizable to patrons, especially children, and something that would make sense with my job. So that's why I didn't choose just Mika the fairy, because I could have chosen Mika, but I really wanted like little kids, like a 5-year-old, to hear that I'm this person, and in this case I'm Sprout, and then make that connection like, oh, her name's Sprout, she's the seed fairy and she makes things sprout, she makes plants sprout out of the ground. So yeah, after doing some brainstorming, some thinking, I had like a whole list of different fairy names, I came up with Sprout. And also we couldn't use names that other fairies had at the festival, even if they weren't cast members, if they were like boothy people, like for example Spark the fairy. We couldn't be Spark because there was already a Spark the fairy at the festival, but luckily no one else was named Sprout, so I took Sprout. So here I am, Sprout the fairy, and my job at the village of Willy-Nilly is basically to plant seeds and to manage the pollinators. But my job as a cast member primarily is to entertain little children. Of course, I need to entertain adults as well, but the focus is on the children, and then of course the dancing. Now I am actually open-minded to singing and playing an instrument. I actually bought a recorder. I'm going to try to learn how to play a recorder and then see if I like it, see if that's something that I want to do. But for now, like as of 2020, I have just been dancing and prancing around and just talking to people. Another requirement of the cast members of the Ohio Renaissance Festival is to have an accent. So we had a choice of either the classic English accent or Irish or Scottish. And in some cases you could do like French or whatever, Russian, whatever makes sense for your character. And so as the fairy that I am, a Scottish accent would make sense. And I chose Scottish over Irish just because I feel like Scottish is a little bit easier for me than the Irish accent. So I've been working on it. I'm really bad at accents. I've never been able to do accents ever in my life. So I'm definitely an amateur, but I've been basically doing a stream of consciousness where I basically say my thoughts out loud, but with a Scottish accent, of course. But it's really hard because I also want to do a really high-pitched voice, which that with the Scottish accent is incredibly difficult.
I really want to do a high-pitched voice, and I struggle to think about the high-pitched voice with
the Scottish accent. And I really can't do it anymore right now because I'm already starting to lose my voice because this is the second video that I've recorded in a row and I've been really loud and projecting. And I also did an online LARP all night long, so my voice is struggling right now. I can't do it anymore. But the point is, that's my goal. I know I probably butchered it just now, but my goal is to have a Scottish accent with a high-pitched voice because I feel like that's what Sprout would have, and that is my weakness right now. But when I have years and years to practice, it'll get better over time. I just started learning the Scottish accent like a couple months ago, or a few months ago now. So yeah, sorry about your ears and butchering them with my awful accent and high-pitched voice. But anyway, moving on, I do want to make a Renaissance Festival video that I might talk about like what it's like to work at the Renaissance Festival, and then another video that basically explains the audition process, as long as I'm allowed to make that video. I think I am. It's really nothing serious. The audition process plus like the rehearsals and like what we do as cast members. So I won't go too in depth of that in this video. This video is more about just Sprout the Fairy. Another requirement of being a Fae of the Ohio Renaissance Festival is really over-the-top makeup. Now this year, or in 2020, it didn't really matter. We were wearing masks and it was like an unofficial Renaissance thing because the Ohio Renaissance Festival was canceled. So we had a mini version of the Ohio Renaissance Festival that was like a third of the size, which was really nice, by the way, because it was like a trial run for me. I got to really see what it's like working as a cast member without the full-blown experience. It was like a tutorial in a video game. It was like a tutorial mode. So now this year I will be a lot better prepared for what's to come. But anyway, makeup. But what we're supposed to do at the Ohio Renaissance Festival is the Fae would come in at like 7 o'clock in the morning, which the Ohio Renaissance Festival starts at like 10:30, but we would go at 7 o'clock in the morning or somewhere around there just to do our makeup, because we do like airbrushing makeup. We would have 1 or 2 airbrush devices, whatever you want to call them, and we would do these crazy airbrushing techniques on our face, and it would look really cool. I don't know how necessary that is, if I could achieve the same look with eyeshadow, but I haven't tried it yet, so that is one thing that sounds like it would really suck as a Fae, is having to get there so early. But at least it ends at 6, so it's not like at the Texas Renaissance Festival that the festival runs for 12 hours long and ends at like 9 o'clock at night. The Ohio Renaissance Festival actually closes at 6, so we can actually go home early and get some sleep for the Sunday the next day. And I think that's all for the requirements. The Fae, honestly, I don't want to say they had less requirements than everyone else, because that's not true. They had different requirements than everyone else. Like, for example, the Fae didn't need to learn like the history of, you know, real life Renaissance stuff. If there was ever a conversation about what's going on in real life in the Renaissance times, us fairy could be like, oh, well, we don't really pay attention to that stuff because we pay attention to our own fairy stuff. But at the same time, we had different requirements like the incredible garb and the makeup and the over-the-top personalities and whatnot. One thing that the fays are supposed to do for a normal Renaissance year that we didn't get to do this year was really interacting with the children. So from what I heard in the rehearsal period is basically the fairies would be playing games with kids like all day, or just, you know, talking and interacting with kids. That is our main focus. We would play games like tag and, like, I don't know, dancing around each other and just being silly with kids. And we would also pass out little trinkets. So for Sprout, I would naturally pass out seeds to kids, which obviously we couldn't do in 2020 because of the pandemic. But I can't wait till I can do stuff like that, because when I was a kid, who knows how old I was? It was probably when I was about 5. I would go to the Texas Renaissance Festival with my mom, and I was a very gullible kid. I believed in everything. I believed in fairies at the Renaissance Festival. I believed in Mickey Mouse at Disney World when I was like 7, which is kind of sad. I thought Mickey Mouse was real. I thought all the Disney characters were like real. So when I went to the Texas Renaissance Festival, I thought the fairies were real, and one fairy came up to me. I remember her being like red and orange, and she handed me this little like marble slab. You know those little like glass marble things that you would put in vases with plants in it? It was basically like that, but it was red and it had a little bubble in it. And she gave it to me and she said, "This is an enchanted rock or whatever. Keep it with you. It's magical. It'll bring you luck. Yada yada." And oh my god, I thought it was real. I kept that rock on me all the time, and I legitimately thought it was magical, and I legitimately thought that fairy was real. So I want to do that to other kids, and it's actually kind of sad that I can't really do that to my own daughter because I'm a fairy working at the Renaissance Festival. If I was just a patron, I'd be like, oh, look at those fairies, they're real fairies. But it might be kind of weird to do that since I'm dressing up as a fairy for RenFest. But it'll still be cool to take her to RenFest every day and let her actually get to experience it all the time. Like for me, I didn't experience RenFest that much, and I absolutely loved it, but I wish I was able to go there more because at the time we lived like 2 or 3 hours away from it. But now with Briid, she'll be able to go every day that it's open. And then when I'm working with other kids, I can pretend that I'm a real fairy and that we're really magical, and that's super exciting. It is kind of annoying though when those kids come up to you and they're like, you're not a real fairy. Or especially like when I was working at Ravenswood Leather, I was dressed as an elf on the fairy 1001 Dreams weekend. So these 2 little girls came up to me, and one was older, one was younger. They were like, I don't know, 5 and 6 or something. And the 5-year-old was like, oh, are you a real elf? And I was like, yeah, I'm a real elf. And then the older sister was like, you're not a real elf. She's not a real elf. And I was like, why are you killing the magic for your sister? So yeah, I'm gonna have to learn how to deal with that. Be like, no, trust me, I'm a real fairy. I have to do my best to be as convincing as possible. And it was kind of hard in 2020 because I actually had a few kids like come up to me and hug me and fiddle with my things on my belt, and it was super exciting and I absolutely loved it. I actually loved it more than I even thought I would. It's really something when a little kid's like, oh my god, you're a fairy. But a lot of the parents were like, no, don't hug her, you know, pandemic. So it was sad, but they weren't like that at the Yuletide Village event. So the Yuletide Village Season of Lights event was at the Ohio Renaissance Festival, but it was a Christmas event, and I wasn't working, but I did dress up as a Christmas elf, and I had like 20 kids come up to me and be like, oh, you're a real elf, or their parents would be like, look, that's a real elf. and they'd come up to me and hug me, and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm a real elf, and I work for Santa, and yada yada yada. And it caught me off guard because I was not working that night, and I had my baby in my arms, my family around me. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm a real elf. But I loved it. It filled my heart with joy. That's the best way I can describe it. I did not expect it. I expected it to be fun, but I didn't expect it to fill me with some sort of, I don't know, fulfillment, some sort of purpose. Like, I felt it gave me purpose to make these kids feel this way, like, you know, bringing out the magic and them thinking that I'm a real fairy or a real elf. It's quite special. So yeah, I want to do it again. Hopefully in 2021, things will go back to normal in regards to the pandemic, and hopefully we don't have to wear masks, so we can, you know, smile, and we can let children play with our fiddly things and give them C's, and, you know, get down to their level. That was another thing that we couldn't do in 2020, was we weren't supposed to kneel down, because normally we would kneel down to be eye level with the children so that they don't feel threatened or intimidated in any way. But we couldn't do that because, you know, the thing. So I'm hoping in 2021 we'll be able to do all that fun stuff. I don't know, I'm just excited. I know I didn't get to do all that stuff in 2020, but working there at 2020, which by the way, it was more of a volunteer job, but working there was just so rewarding. But yeah, I think that's all I had to say about Sprout the Fairy. I'm sure over the years I will develop her character more. That is all I have for now, so thank you guys so much for watching, and I really hope to see you in the next video.